ErravensAddiction here with another Knitting Corner. If you used to follow the Knitting Corner podcast, you'll know that I used to do these about 4 years ago. You also kind of will know that there was a joke about the fact that I was always taking videos in a different spot, and that just kind of got to be too much for me, as well as other things in my life were going on at the time, and I let the podcast kind of die out. But I now have a normal spot to record as I please, and I wanted to try to bring it back again and see how this goes. I'm hoping to do kind of the same thing, which is like recently bought stash, work in progresses, finished objects, just fun little tidbits. Might be doing some reviewing too this time around. I do like to collect needles, project bags, all the little tiny bits and pieces you'll need for your crafting, and I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing to add in, that I would kind of give my 2 cents on different things. With that being said, I believe that we can just kind of get right into it. Oh, first thing is yes, I do have my own spot to film now. I kind of have my own craft room now. About 2 years ago, me and my husband bought our first home, and we've been fixing it up ever since. If you decide you would like to follow me on Instagram, I'm pretty active on there now. ErravensAddiction is also there. I'll link everything in the description at the bottom, but you'll see little bits and pieces of the renovations we've been doing to our home, because I think just about every room in this house needed renovation. And now that this room is finished, I kind of claimed it for myself and made it into a craft room now. And as far as crafting goes, I dabble in just about everything, so I'll probably show little bits of everything. I definitely do knitting and crocheting. Those are my 2 top crafts ever since I've learned them, which I was like 10. It's like 17 years ago. That's crazy. And then I also spin. I process fiber sometimes. I dye yarns and fibers. I do jewelry making on a small basis sometimes, polymer clay. I just started sewing, which you'll see here in a moment. And you'll probably end up seeing just about everything on here, because it's my channel and I like to do crafts, and you'll see everything. With that, let's get into recently bought things, which I buy a lot of things a lot of the time, so I could have showed you just about this entire shelf behind me. But I figured I would go with what I bought this week and work my way from there. And I don't think this is a thing anymore, but as you can see over here, that whole area over there is kind of dark because apparently I went through like a black phase, but these are all of my high-end yarns. So I do knit with high-end yarns, but I have this really bad habit that when I buy the high-end yarns, they have to be for a very special project, and not until about the last couple months did I think I just had to start finding patterns and knitting up the ever-growing stash of wools and things like that behind me. But I do also knit with like Michaels and Hobby Lobby stuff because it's easy to get a hold of, and I knit a lot for people that don't have the time to care for a non-superwash thing. But so I was at Hobby Lobby the other day because I needed to spend money apparently, and I am working on potentially entering some of my handmade knitting and crocheting into our local fair this summer. So I did need a couple things for a project. And I ended up picking up 2 balls of each color. And sorry about the lighting. This room has gorgeous, gorgeous 6-foot windows that usually let the natural light shine in the morning. And I got up, and today was is going to be my filming day, and it's overcast. So overcast, I had to use the artificial light in this room. So it's going to be a little tricky. But this is like a very purpley grayish tone. And as you can see, it's the yarn bee that Hobby Lobby sells, and it's soft and sleek, low pill fiber. And I think it's just pretty much acrylic, but I just needed a really soft hat, and I didn't have anything in my stash right now that was worsted that were the colors I wanted to play with, because I also got this gray, and they're going in a project together, and they're hopefully going to have enough here to do an insulate hat and an insulate pair of mittens. And I will link both of the patterns in the description box below. But I've made them before. I've probably made like 4 or 5 hats by now, and they're color work. And they are not the TARDIS, the Dalek from the Doctor Who. And they're really fast. They knit up probably within a day or two, but I really wanted to showcase my color work in the fair if I enter them. And I wanted to do with the hat and the mittens so that they can go in as a matching pair. And I really purple is one of my favorite colors, so when I saw those 2 colors together, I just had to pick them up. And then I also saw, it's again a yarn bee, it's called 44th Street, and it's blush. And I'm not sure if it's a fingering weight or I think they want to call it a fingering weight, but it's a very, very light fingering weight with a little bit of, I don't know if you'll see that halo. And it's a very pale pink. So this artificial light is just going to kill me. And it's, again, I think it's 70% acrylic and 30% polymide, but I'm pretty sure it's just pretty much acrylic and plastic. But again, it's kind of soft, and I have a project in mind for it, which I will probably explain a little later on. And for $3, I couldn't beat it. Oh, and it's like 500 yards. 540 yards. So that's a lot of yardage for a couple bucks. I actually picked this up a couple weeks back, but I just remembered I had it and pulled it out of the bag. But like I said, I love notations and knitting bags and yarn needle holders, all of that stuff. I love it. And I saw this at Michael's, and I just loved it, so I had to pick it up. And it has a zipper, and there's like a decent amount of size in there. And yes, I didn't even pull the plastic out. That's how little I used it. But it's very cute. I love little tiny, like the little tiny hedgehogs on the front of that are adorable. So I figured I could throw my needles in this, inside of my project bags, or my notations, or anything little like that. Then this week sometime I realized I owned the entire set of DPNs and convertible needles, I think in the 36-inch length from, I'm drawing a blank on the name of Signature Needles. I own both the whole set of DPNs in 6 inches because I have larger palms, and then also their convertibles in 6 inches with the I want to say like 36-inch cord, but I could be wrong. I just know it's a very long cord. It's longer than I need for making my hats. And I don't mind making hats on DPNs, but I get very stressed with keeping all the needles without letting them fall off. And I knew I needed a good pair of hat making needles, as well as I needed some of the very tiny, tiny needles, like 000 and 00 needles. And I didn't feel like paying $60 right now. And I didn't even look on the site to see if they sell that size needle. So I didn't go with signatures this time. Instead, I decided to go with Shikagoo. I think that's how you say that, Shikagoo. and I got their convertible needles, or I guess these are called, yeah, I think they're convertibles. Interchangeable. These are interchangeable. Those are convertibles. And I'm making another one of these hats, which I will do more of a show on those. I have like 6 or 7 of them. One of these days I will pull them all out and show everybody them. But they're one of my favorites. I love the way they drape. I love slouchy hats. I like the way it sits back on my head. So I needed a new pair of knitting those hats. So I got I'm gonna say this is like their 12 or 13 inch cord, and it's the red lace one because I've heard those are really good. And then I just got the size needles that I needed, which I think are 6s, if I'm right, 6 or 8s. I forget exactly which ones, but I haven't even pulled them out of the bag yet. I got them yesterday through Amazon. It was 1-day shipping. I buy a lot of stuff through Amazon because of that. My whole family shares one subscription, so I literally live across the street from my parents. So we just have everything shipped to their house, and I come and pick it up. But it was 1-day shipping. I think the needle tips cost me $10 or $11, and the cord cost like the same amount, like $11. So for $20, I got brand new needles shipped to me. I also bought, one of them are already on a project, but I bought 2 pairs of the Knitter's Pride carbons. I have another one of these, and I think they're like 2s, and I don't hate them. They're not as nice as I would say. They're not as stiff as my signature needles are. I really like how stiff my signature needles are. I have been known to bend cheaper metals because I knit just so extensively during the day. And so these are not as stiff. They're definitely got a little bit of a give to them. I'll open this up and see if I can show you. Especially with the smaller sizes. I don't think I've actually ever worked with something this tiny. I think a 0 or 1 is about as small as I would have went before. But these are my 000s. And like even my 2s kind of have that, like, I don't know if you've noticed, but it has that bend to it. So I just have to be very aware not to be too tight with my knitting with these. But if you can see, they have a very nice tip to them. I would say probably just as sharp as the signature needles. I get the pointy ends and stilettos. That's what they're called. I get the stilettos, not the rounded tip or the doll ones or whatever those ones are called. I haven't worked with this brand's larger size needles, so I don't know if by the time you get up to like 6s or 8s they start to get a very dull tip. I'm not aware of that. But I bought those for some projects, and I want to say these were also like $10 for 5 of them, and they're DPNs. And sorry, I just read that they actually advertise that they have flexibility. So they like to be flexible. And then the last thing I bought was, I actually bought 4 of these in a pack, 2 different sizes, because I didn't know which size I would need, but they're the yarn guides for color work. And I haven't used it yet. I think I need to look up, like, even though I crochet and I can hold my yarn above my finger the way you're supposed to in crochet, I have a really hard time holding the yarn the same way when I'm knitting. When I knit, I look like I am a 3-year-old learning to knit for the first time. I hold it in a very awkward way and I pick it up every time. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to teach myself how to wrap my yarn in a way to not have to do so much work when I'm knitting. But I have to look it up to see if I can make this work, because I would like to have my color work look very, very finished when I am done, and not just look like I was picking up yarn every 2 seconds and flipping it around. And then the last thing I have as my most recent. Oh, and those were like $6. Sorry. I also got both the Knitter's Prides and these came from Amazon as well. I think they were like $6, but like if you know your size and you know you only need one of them, I think they're for like $2 or $3 on there. But and same thing. They came in one day. I bought them all on Thursday. They all came by Friday, but yeah, I have to see how that goes. I'll have to let everybody know. Then also while I was at Hobby Lobby, I spent about 15-20 minutes just staring at their sewing machines. Out of all of the crafts that I do, I can knit. I'm probably an advanced knitter at this point in my life. Probably a pretty advanced crocheter. Basic spinner. Can do a little bit of felting. Like I said, I do jewelry making. I dabble in paints. I do some polymer clay. All of that I'm very proficient at. But sewing and me have never gotten along, ever. I've owned probably 2 sewing machines in my life. Never got past the point of properly setting up a bobbin, I think. And the knitting would never go well. And so I never learned to enjoy it. And so I never continued to do it. And I'm always disappointed that I can't sew because I do love project bags, but I don't always have like $40 to go spend on a brand new project bag. But I do have $5 to spend on some lovely fabrics, and I could make my own. I know they're not hard. And my sister talked about maybe helping me set up a sewing machine or learning how to properly work one. And I want to hold out for that, but at the same time, there's a whole wall of sewing machines that I just stared at. And so instead, I passed up the sewing machines. I told myself not yet. And instead I came home with a hand needle and 2.5 yards of fabric to hopefully be able to learn to hand sew. And this is one of the fabrics I picked up. Actually, if I probably hadn't seen this one, I probably wouldn't have picked up any of them. But this one is just absolutely gorgeous. And I've probably been working on the beekeeper's quilt for about 10 years. In a later episode, I will pull all of my Hexie Puffs out and all of my yarn. And I'll do an entire episode about how far that's come. But yeah, I thought this would just make a very cute project bag for my beekeeper's quilt. And because I was picking up this one, if I'm having them cut one, I might as well have them cut another one. And then I almost had them cut about a dozen different fabrics, but I just came home with 2. And then this one, which I don't know if you can see, it's just bunches of different owls, which I love. It's a beautiful, beautiful fabric. And so I came home yesterday from Hobby Lobby knowing I wanted to learn how to hand sew. And so I spent the afternoon looking on YouTube at different ways to hand sew. Ended up, me and my sister watched about a couple hours of a woman who hand sews reenactment piece. No, she doesn't reenact. She sews, historically, I think that's what she likes to do. She historically sews pieces. And we just spent like a couple hours watching her sew her pieces and talk about historical pieces. And she even went to a historical place in Europe. I have to link it. If you're into that thing, it was very cool. And I think by the end of it, me and my sister were like, we need to start making 1800s dresses. Like, we can't, neither of us can sew. But I at least picked up enough tips then from her hand sewing to do a very, very crude little knitted bag. I definitely need work. Like, you can see my stitches and things like that. But for a first attempt, I'm not gonna say I did very bad. And I knew I was putting this on the inside. I knew I did it. but I don't hate that. I didn't want to shorten my bag any further because it is a very short little bag for the Hexy Puffs. It doesn't have to be too big for that. It's not holding Hexy Puffs right now though. But I figured sometime this week I will probably cut another piece or two out of that fabric, cut it a little bit bigger, sit down, really take my time, really sew this one well. This one was just, I really wanted a project bag done by the end of the day. And it really only took me, hand sewing, it probably took me only like 2 hours. 2 hours to do all of it. But with that being said, this was probably my first finished object to show you, technically. And then I'll just get into all my finished project. Oh, well, that's my only finished project. Nothing else is finished. I could probably show you 3 or 4 dozen things I've finished since I last did these videos, but those were 3 or 4 years ago. I shouldn't be showing off things I did that long ago. So instead I decided to start totally fresh. Wasn't going to show you any finished objects except for this because I finished it yesterday. Everything else will be work in progresses. And the first one came out of the bag, and this is where my other needles are from Amazon. These are my 00s, and same reason I bought the blush or the 44th Street yarn is because of these projects. And I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there is very, very, very tiny ribbing on this. And I got this at Michael's when it was on sale. It's probably a fingering weight. I hate reading ball descriptions because this is literally thicker than that stuff, but they're saying it's not. But it's 678 yards of acrylic and 85% acrylic, 15% nylon. And it's wool-like simile lane by Loops and Thread. Ooh, that was a mouthful. But another one of the little tiny hobbies I do from time to time is I like to collect Barbies, and I like to dabble in making very small patterns for them. I think that's the reason I probably end up collecting the Barbies in the first place, is because I want to knit small items. I've knitted myself a sweater. It went really well. That is one of the finished projects that got finished in between that I will pull out someday, because I did start it. I actually started it back when I had my old channel. It was a colorwork sweatshirt. I adore it. It's one of my favorite pieces. I keep it tucked away. I pull it out once every couple years and wear it. But that's the thing. I only pull it out once every couple years, because if I would wear it to every single event I had to go to if I didn't think that would be weird, because I love it. It fits me to a T, but it took like 6 months to make and took like 2,000 yards of knitting, and I'm not one of those people, like, I'm not a size 0, I'm not a small, so first of all, making myself a sweater costs a lot of money, and then the amount of work goes into it is extra, and I'm not able to like knit an entire sweater in a month. So I've come to the point where I do not buy sweater quantities. I do not make myself sweaters. But wouldn't it be cute to make little tiny sweaters for your little tiny dolls? And I'm a child at heart. I will never probably grow up. And so now that I have all this extra space to do things like buy Barbies and fill up a corner of my craft room with them, I will do it. But I am working on a pattern. It's by nioknit. Her name is nioknit. It's free. I think it supposedly takes 110 yards, but she does it in sports or worsted weight, because it's knitted for a knitted doll I think she makes. And I just need it for a Barbie, so I'm doing it in the fingering weight. And it is the Ketos cable pullover, but I'm not doing cables to it. I'm just doing a simple knit pullover with it. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it fits and it turns out well, and maybe next time I'll have to have it modeled for you. After that, I have like 16 different projects in my head, but I'm only showing the things that are substantially knitted on. Anything that just got started, anything I have plans for, is not going to be on here. So next week you might have like 20 up-to-dates. One of my friends gave me this idea, so I'm sort of stealing it from her, but she likes to use all those little tiny photo boxes for her her littler crafts. Like, she does beading as well, and she does scrapbooking. So she keeps all of, and paints and stuff, she keeps them all in this. This doesn't always work for all of my knitting projects because some of them are just so big, but this is, I figured they could sit on my shelf as I was working on them. They have a spot here to keep to know what is in it, but I haven't filled them yet. But keep everything nice and organized. First big project. This is one of the projects I'm doing for I have 2 fairs that I can enter in July. Which I didn't say, I live at almost the very bottom of central Pennsylvania. I literally live about 20 minutes from the Maryland border, about an hour south of Harrisburg, and 45 minutes west of Gettysburg. So we were lucky enough to be able to enter 2 fairs if I would like to, and I've never entered a fair with my knitting or my crocheting. I did as a child enter with my beading. I think I made a bracelet. I think I won 1st or 2nd place with it. But I'm kind of excited. I kind of want ribbons. It's kind of the reason I'm wanting to enter. But I have about a dozen things I can enter, or I want to enter. I could enter every single category if I wanted to, but I have about a dozen things I want to enter, like the hat and the mittens. I have another hat that I want to enter, a shawl, which you'll see later, at least 1 blanket, maybe 2. Actually, I had 4 blankets. Told myself I didn't have time for making 4 blankets. I brought it back down to 2. A crocheted scarf I was thinking about. And then I would love to do like a baby coat, pullover, and vest, and cardigan. Because it's baby size, I could probably knock them out a little better. And so the first thing I am going to show is the baby coat, because I already have the pattern for it. I made this coat once before for some acquaintances who were having a little girl. So if you would like to follow me on Ravelry, I'm also ErravensAddiction on Ravelry. I'm not the most active on there right now, but maybe if I had a reason, maybe I'll bring back up my group. I had an ErravensAddiction Knitting Corner group. I could restart that, and we could all get together and hang out on that spot and have fun. But I don't keep up with, like, I don't ever enter in all of the yarns that I bought. I don't enter in, like, if I buy a book pattern, I don't enter it. I try to keep updated with my projects, but even those get not too much, but it's just, I don't take the time. Especially if I'm making it for someone else, I usually want to give it to that person immediately, so I don't like take pictures of it. And then the pictures I do have are always like subpar, and I don't want to put, I do have subpar pictures up there, but the picture of this is subpar. But it's on there. It's on Ravelry as ErravensAddiction if you want to go look at it. I don't even think it has the buttons on it. Always been disappointed. They were photographers. I was really hoping they would take a very stunning photo of it. Never saw it. But it's a very quick knit. It's made with bulky yarn, done on size 10s. And I think I knit this all up in one. Actually, I knit the brim once, tore it all back out, because I decided I wanted to go with a different size, which I'm making the 6 to 12 month size, and I was making the 12 to 18 month size before that. And I knit all of this in one day while I was, like, in between working even. I knit all of this in one day. And it's knit from the collar down, even though it's a jacket and it's knit like that, but it's knit from the collar down. Really fast, really simple. I feel like the pattern's very clean to read. Like, it's not hard to understand. It is a paid for pattern though, but I bought it way back when I did it the first time. It's €6, but it's like $6.70 in the US dollar. I think the pattern I'm taking takes like 4 balls of 120, which I think is like, that makes it like, I want to say it's somewhere between like 400 and 480 of yards for the size I'm doing, but it goes anywhere from about 300 yards to 700 yards of bulky weight. I am using, because it had to be baby soft, I probably wouldn't have used this yarn if it didn't have to be baby soft, but I'm using the Charisma Tweed in color, I think they just call this white. Really? It's a tweed. In color white, just using this one. They were on sale at Michael's for $1.99, so I couldn't beat that. And I kind of like the way, I knew I wanted something that was going to look very jackety, and I didn't want to do one of the baby colors. I don't like to make my knits for little ones in pinks or the pastels. Not anything against it, I just don't like it. I like the very modern, sleek colors, so I went, that's how that's knitting up. I would have preferred to have found a gray tweed, and I do think I should have just done a slate gray in this. It would have looked very nice, I feel like, but I like it. It's not the worst thing ever. I'm hoping to have enough yarn left over to do because I was doing the larger size, I bought more yarn than I originally needed that much yarn, went down a size, got the other size yarn now. Hoping I have enough to either do the vest or the pullover sweater for the competition as well then, now that I don't need as much yarn. And then next, another little box. I also picked all of these up at Michael's for $1.99, I think, as well. I had a 20% off coupon too, which when they send out the 20% coupons, it's even included on sale items. So like, for these kind of projects, you can't beat $1.60 per skein. But this is the blanket I'm hoping to enter into the fair. I realized this winter I have pretty much made everybody else in my life a blanket. Almost everybody else in my life has a hand knitted or hand crocheted, I don't knit my blankets, I crochet them, blanket made by me. I even made my mother-in-law her second blanket from me. And so I don't have my own blanket. I steal my husband's blanket all the time because he doesn't always use it. But I don't have my own, so I decided to go with a rainbow blanket. And then also, instead of just being simple about doing just a granny square in solid blocks of color, I decided to do not only just rib stripes, but I keep switching, like I invert them. This blanket will be huge, but I have to kind of rework it for the fair to fit inside of the size range. But the original blanket has 100 squares. I have to make 5 of each color to make 1/4. 5 times 30, 120. I think it's 120 squares. If I do the whole size blanket. And to make 1/4 of the blanket takes about a ball of yarn for each color to be done in each of these. And then I'm inverting the colors so they'll constantly have a different centerpiece to them and a different outer color, and they just keep going in circles. And then hopefully I can lay it out into a design or a grid work of some sort in the end. I worked it all out one day on paper, exactly what kind of color design I was looking for, and that's how I know how many squares of each color need to be made. But I probably I'm just shy of having like 1/4 of the blanket made. But only the finished squares go in here, and I have like 2 more colors to finish for the first 1/4 of the blanket, which is actually just shy of the 48-inch marker, which is why I'm thinking I might just sew them together or crochet them together with one color yarn and rework the pattern for the fair. And then when the fair is over, I'll just uncrochet them all, cut them all out, and rework them into the blanket I want for my bed. Or probably my couch, because I spend a lot of time just curled up on my couch. And then I think this is my last work in progress for today. Yes, I don't think I have any more work in progresses at the moment that isn't just one row in, and that's pointless. But here's another one of those shadow boxes. I also find them really pretty. I've always collected them, so might as well put them to work. This one is my shawl that I'm making for the fair, hopefully. This one's knitted, and it's Stephen West's Starflake. I think that's what it is. And I'm just trying to pull out all the yarn. I got to the first ball of yarn finished on this. These are done. Hobby Lobby came out with these like Pyram needles, and they're like triangular shaped, and they click together, and they have this weird tip to them. Like, I don't know if you can see that, but it's a very weird tip. And they were like, I want to say $4 or $5, so I figured I was kind of dabbling with the idea of coming back and doing a show again, and I was like, I'll pick them up, I'll knit with them, I'll see how I feel about them. I ended up putting an entire project on them. They're not horrible. I hate like the very beginner style knitting needles. I don't even know who makes them at like Michael's or Walmart. Those ones, maybe Susan Bates. Are they Susan Bates? I know that's what the hooks are, and I don't hate them, but these are the very beginner style. They're not the very beginner style, and they're just such a dull tip. I cannot knit with them. But for those out there that have to start somewhere and love them, more power to you. I just can't knit with them. And these ones are okay. I don't like that tip. It's supposed to help not let things like slip off and stuff. If I could find my 8s right now, because they must be in a project somewhere. If I could find my 8s in my signature needles, I would probably be knitting on them. But I can't. They're in a project somewhere in this house. I cannot find them. But these are just size 8s. I think this is what the pattern called for. No, this is not what the pattern called for. Pattern is knit in fingering weight, about 1,600 yards. Like I said, it's Stephen West's Starflake. It is a paid-for pattern. It's like €6, which is again is $6.70 in the US. But it's a beautiful pattern. Like, here's what I have done so far. And it's a very, very quick knit. Each of these little sections, I think I get about 2 sections done a day. And that's just because I'm not working very hard on it. Like, I got so much of that jacket done because every single moment I had extra, I was knitting on it. Because I was really excited. I love when a pattern isn't constantly changing, but I'm not bored. Like, I don't need it to be a lace work pattern that I have to read the pattern over and over again, but I want every other row to be different. And while this one sort of every other row is different, it's very monotonous in the beginning, which is okay. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just, it gets boring after a little bit, and when you have to do the same thing 6 different times, by now I'm like, oh, I ran out of yarn, I'll just set it to the side for a minute. But yeah, but at the same time, this is usually done in color work. If I had done it in color work, I probably wouldn't be quite as bored. And I did learn a new technique while doing this, so that was cool. I love learning new techniques. It's kind of why I picked this one, because I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like it has 2 new techniques, and one of those looks to be intarsia. No, not intarsia. Can't think of the word of it. If I do, I'll put it in the link. But it's brooch knitting. It looks like it has a little section of brooch knitting. I've never done that before, so I was kind of excited for that. But it also it was just a gorgeous shawl. It looks like it's a me size shawl, which is oversized I have a lot of worsted weight or sports weight yarn, so I picked to do it in a thicker yarn, and I upped the needle size because of that. I think it's originally done in like fingering weight on 6s or 4s. But that gray is just a Knit Picks Wool of the Andes, and this, it looks gray, but I'm sure this one might actually have a name for it. Does it? Dove Heather. It's done in Dove Heather. I bought a whole mess of Knit Picks in that color for, forget exactly what it was, but I know it was a project. I know I needed a lot of wool, and then it never came to be. So if you can tell, it's that one sitting right there on the shelf, and that's how much of it I have. I actually have a couple more balls than that. So when I picked to do this shawl and I knew I could do it in a larger weight, I decided that that was one of the yarns I wanted to use up. I'm really hoping to use up quite a bit of my stash yarn this year. That's one of my goals. And so because I was using that, and I also just didn't want to pay for yarn when I have that much sitting on my shelf. When I decided I was going to make that choice, I decided to look through my stash for other yarns that could go with it. This shawl is a color work shawl as well. Like I said, that first piece is usually done in 2 colors. I wanted my piece to be a very solid at the top. But these are my other 2 colors. And this other gray is Cascades 220 sport weight. There's 164 yards. They're 50-gram balls. They're made with Peruvian Highland wool. I don't think they're superwash. I don't think this is superwash either, and it's made with like wool of the Peruvian Highland wool. Exactly the same thing. I wonder what size this is in. Worsted. This one's worsted. This one's sports. This one I think I bought for a sweater before I decided I do not have the willpower to bust through another shawl or scarf. Sweater. Another sweater. So I have a lot of this wool, this one as well, just sitting around in my stash. So I figured between these 2, I probably have 1,600 yards just between those 2 yarns. But it does take a 3rd color, so I wanted a very contrasting color. I wanted it to pop and for your eye to be drawn to the main color and not... No offense to anyone out there who might have knitted this in like very, very complementary colors or anything like that, but I wanted there to be a very focal point to my knitting. I wanted, when the judges walk by this, to look down and be like, oh my god, that orange pops. But I got this. I'm pretty sure I got this in a swap one year. I'm not sure why I got it in the swap. I don't hate any color. Purple's my favorite though. But I'm not saying I hate this. It's Misty Alpacas in worsted. It's a hand-painted tone. I have 3 balls of this for sure. And each ball has 218 yards. And it's 100 grams of 50% alpaca and 50% merino. And yeah, there's definitely a difference. I was about to be like, in my fingers there's not a difference. Like this feels fluffier and this feels a little denser or smoother, if that makes sense. But there's just a tad difference between the feelings. And as you can tell, I got so far on this project, I have not even pulled these out of the hanks. Like, I'll probably decide to do that right before I need them, because that's how I like to do my life, is waiting to the last minute. That was all of my work in progresses for right now. I already did all of my new things. I don't have any finished projects really to show you. That's about it. And I kind of, along the way, I kind of told you all my goals for this year, which is I'm really hoping just to keep up with these. My hope is to kind of knit through that shelf, which that shelf is one side of that. That side is all my fingering. That side is like all my sports and worsted and all that side stuff. This is actually acrylic. It has a project. I just haven't gotten onto it. And those are all of my Wool of the Andes little balls. I actually have more over here, which is all my cones and all of my already caked items, which actually I have something for some of those caked items. But those are some cones. I just love them. They're gorgeous. I probably won't actually knit anything from them. I actually had a green to match all of these. I did actually knit with those last year. Down here is just some messes. Down there is some of my wools. I'm hoping to expand my book collection. I tried really hard to talk myself into about $40 worth of books last week, and I talked myself out of them. But I love having reference books. Like, I'm trying to think if I've actually ever knit anything from any of these books. Oh, I do have a book in there that I do knit from quite often. My hat pattern book is up there. But I love having reference books. Those are my favorite things to have on hand. Especially with my crocheting. I crochet a lot just from memory, just from what I want to knit, crochet. I don't use a pattern usually when I'm crocheting. Like, the granny square is just, it was a pattern someday, but everyone knows how to do a granny square. So I actually do like my crochet reference books is because I like to reference, like, finishing off my blankets and a different edge, or referencing a different square pattern that I might add into the blanket. Like, I like referencing those. So I would love to expand those. Those are all my those are some of my spindles. I'm actually missing some of my spindles. I do not have plans on expanding my spindle collection. I love my spindle collection. I'm really struggling how I'm going to do this. I was thinking I could do a weekly thing where I mesh everything in together all at once, and then I don't know, but someday maybe I will, when I don't have anything else to show you, maybe I'll pull them down again and do another episode with all of my spindles. They're gorgeous. I do spin on them probably once or twice a year, but I just don't have the same time I used to have to spin on them religiously. I haven't even spun on my wheel probably in about a year, which does make me always think, should I just get rid of them? But then that's a whole different story of, like, I don't get rid of my knitting stuff. But yeah, so my goal is to kind of work my way through a lot of this behind me. My goal is to enter into the fair with about a dozen items this year, and to keep up with this. And that's about it for my goals this year. I'm trying not to buy things I don't need. I told myself I needed to learn new techniques, so I've already learned one new technique I learned. I'm teaching myself to hand sew right now, so hopefully that continues to go well. And maybe by next week I'll have a whole nother bag to show you all. And that's about it. As far as goals go for the year. Other things outside of goals. Oh, maybe just a finishing note about how to find me. I already did put that into most of the video. I am pretty active nowadays on Instagram. I probably post probably like twice a week. Now, there's no guarantee on what I post on there. I am trying to direct it towards my fiber arts at the moment because that's what I'm into. But I post when I finish a room in my house there. If you really dig back into my old stuff, I spent about 2 years being an extreme couponer. And so you'll see some of my extreme couponing hauls on there because I love still looking back at what I used to do. It used to be amazing. Try to think. I post a little bit about my life on there. If I'm doing anything exciting, if I've gone anywhere exciting, I kind of post it on there. And that's ErravensAddiction, just like on this channel. Again, I'll link it in the description box below. And I'm trying to think if there's a warning. There's not really a warning to my Instagram. I don't think I post anything there too outlandish. Like I said, I'm trying to direct it more towards my fiber arts right now because that's what I'm doing. And then I also have the Ravelry page, which you are welcome to find me on there, which is also ErravensAddiction. And I will link it as well. Maybe if this goes well, I'll reopen the group that I had previously, try to revamp it, and see what I can do with that. But for the most part, I just use that same thing. I use it as a reference book. I keep all my patterns on there if I'm working on a pattern. If I am looking for a new pattern, I have something in mind, I usually just jump on there. But I used to be much more active. I'm not as active on the boards as I used to be. I just don't have the time. And I don't have a computer that I use regularly. I just use my phone. It's a little hard for my eyesight to handle. Trying to think what else you would find me on. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but same thing. I actually post less on Facebook than I was doing on Instagram. Actually, most of the time I'm posting on Instagram, it gets dragged over to Facebook. So you're better off just finding me on Instagram. I'm more likely to friend you there, more likely to follow you. I keep my Facebook pretty private, pretty closed up. That's about it. I don't know. I should be of the age where all of the new technology makes sense to me, but I do not understand Twitter. I do not understand what's Snapchat. I don't understand Snap. I use Snapchat for the filters. Do not understand Snapchat. And it's about all of. I don't even know if there's new social medias out there to be part of. That's how behind I am on that kind of stuff. But with that being said, I think this is a long enough video now. I made it longer than I actually wanted it to be. I hope you all have a wonderful day and you all keep up with all of your crafting, and hope to see you here again. Bye!